Welcome to Life Stories, where sometimes the smallest voices carry the heaviest truths. What would you do if a 6-year-old handed you a blank piece of paper with just two words scrawled at the bottom? Help me? Would you brush it off as a joke? Or would you risk everything to find out what he couldn't say out loud? This is the story of a boy who stopped smiling, a teacher who refused to stay silent, and a secret buried so deep it took courage just to whisper it. It's about the quiet kind of bravery, the kind that hides behind trembling hands and tear-stained homework. Stay with us because what begins in an ordinary classroom will lead to an extraordinary moment that could change a child's life forever. Let's begin. The first grade classroom at Maplewood Elementary was a kaleidoscope of color and sound. Walls lined with hand-drawn alphabet animals, construction paper rockets dangling from the ceiling, and the faint scent of crayons blending with pencil shavings. Sunlight poured in through the wide windows, casting golden stripes across the desks where 20 children huddled over their spelling tests. The words were simple: cat, dog, sun, but their little brows furrowed with the seriousness of world leaders. Mrs. Campbell moved silently between the rows, her soft-soled flats making no sound on the tiled floor. She was a woman who wore her warmth like her cardigans, always there, always gentle. The kids trusted her not because she demanded it, but because she earned it, every single day, with every quiet kindness. But one child wasn't writing. Ethan Parker, a wiry 5-year-old with uncombed brown hair and sneakers 2 sizes too big, sat hunched over his desk like he was bracing for impact. His pencil hovered inches above the paper, his grip tight, knuckles white. Normally, Ethan was the type of kid who couldn't sit still, a blur of raised hands and bouncing knees. But today he didn't move, didn't look up, didn't blink. His shoulders curled inward as if trying to disappear inside himself. When the recess bell rang, a rush of laughter and the screech of chairs broke the spell. The kids scattered like marbles on a hardwood floor. Ethan bolted too quickly. Mrs. Campbell barely had time to register the blur of him vanishing through the doorway. She reached his desk and froze. His test sheet was nearly blank, but at the bottom, in shaky, uneven pencil strokes, were 2 words: help me. Below the words, a single smudge. Not ink, not dirt, a tear. She stood there, the paper trembling slightly in her hands, her stomach sinking with dread. Was this a joke? A child's misunderstanding? But Ethan wasn't a prankster. He was the kind of boy who apologized if he accidentally stepped on an ant. Mrs. Campbell slipped the paper into her desk drawer with trembling fingers and walked quickly to the teacher's lounge, her heart hammering in a rhythm that didn't match the quiet hum of the coffee machine. She opened Ethan's file. Attendance, spotless. Grades, average. Behavior, bright, enthusiastic, curious. Nothing in the paperwork screamed for help, but her memory did. Just last week, she'd seen him flinch, really flinch, when the janitor dropped a mop bucket in the hall. Not like a startle, like he was preparing for a blow. And that hoodie. He wore it every day, no matter how warm. One afternoon, she'd seen the sleeves slide up as he reached for a book, a flash of yellow-purple on his wrist. "What happened?" she'd asked gently. "I fell," he'd mumbled, yanking the sleeve down fast. Kids fall. They get bruises. But this felt like something else. Mr. Thompson, the 4th grade teacher, wandered in, coffee in hand. She asked him carefully, "Have you ever had a student write something concerning during a test?" He shrugged. "Sure. Jake drew a zombie eating the principal last week. Kids have wild imaginations." "This one didn't draw," she said. "He wrote, 'Help me.' That's all." Thompson paused, eyebrows raising. "Did you ask him?" "He ran before I could." "Probably nothing," he said and walked out. But Mrs. Campbell's gut told her it was something. Something dark, something urgent. She picked up the phone and called the counselor's office. 15 minutes later, Ethan sat on the blue couch in Miss Ramirez's office, clutching a threadbare teddy bear. He wouldn't look up. He didn't cry. But his silence screamed. "You don't have to talk," Miss Ramirez said gently. "We can just color." Still, Ethan didn't move. Mrs. Campbell sat beside him, her voice soft. "Sweetheart, when you wrote those words, were you trying to tell us something?" A long silence. Then a whisper so faint it barely moved the air. "I'm not supposed to talk." Ms. Ramirez leaned forward. "Who told you that?" He shook his head. Tight lips. Locked jaw. "It's okay. Mrs. Campbell whispered. You're safe here. Ethan's hands twisted the teddy bear's ears. Then, barely audible, Jessica yells, a lot. Mrs. Campbell's breath caught. Jessica? My dad's new wife? Ethan said, his voice barely above a breath. She gets mad when I talk. She says bad kids go in the dark. Then she locks me in the closet. Something cracked open in the room, a moment too raw for language, a secret clawing its way out from years of silence. Mrs. Campbell reached out, touched his cold fingers. Does your dad know? He says I should listen to her, Ethan murmured, or I'll make things harder. Outside, children laughed on the playground. But in this small room with yellow walls and lavender scent, a different story was unfolding, a story of fear, silence, and survival. Miss Ramirez stood slowly. We need to call child services, now. Mrs. Campbell didn't hesitate. As she picked up the phone, Ethan clutched her sleeve. I don't want to go home, he whispered. His eyes weren't just scared. They were pleading. She squeezed his hand, looked him dead in the eyes. You won't, I promise. But when she hung up the phone, the twist hit like a punch. CPS would arrive in an hour. Ethan's father was due in 25 minutes. What would you do if you had only minutes to protect a child from the person meant to love them most? How far should a teacher go when the lines between classroom and sanctuary blur? The front doors of the school swung open, and with them walked danger, dressed in denim and high heels. Part 2 begins with the face of the enemy. Standing just feet away. Jessica's heels clicked against the polished linoleum like a ticking clock, sharp and steady, each step pulling dread tighter in Mrs. Campbell's chest. Behind her, Ethan sat curled up on the nurse's cot, knees drawn to his chest, his fingers still tangled in the worn fur of the teddy bear. The nurse, bless her, stayed calm, reading from a picture book, though her voice trembled slightly at the edges. Mrs. Campbell stood outside the office, her posture straight, but her palms damp. She could hear Principal Henderson speaking calmly in the front vestibule, trying to stall Ethan's father and Jessica. But Jessica's voice cut through the building like glass. He's our kid. We're not waiting around for your bureaucratic nonsense. Mrs. Campbell pressed the walkie-talkie to her lips, whispered, How long? Ms. Ramirez's voice crackled back. 10 minutes. The CPS worker just pulled off the highway. Hang in there. 10 minutes. It might as well have been forever. Footsteps approached. Mrs. Campbell turned just in time to see Jessica storming down the hall, her eyes locked on the door to the nurse's office. Mr. Parker followed, silent and tight-jawed, his presence as chilling as hers was loud. Mrs. Campbell stepped into their path. He's in here, Jessica snapped. You've had your fun playing gatekeeper. Now get out of our way. It's standard protocol, Mrs. Campbell said evenly, praying her voice didn't betray her panic. You'll need to sign him out. Jessica's laugh was sharp and dry. Sign him out? What is this, a library? But it wasn't Jessica that made Mrs. Campbell's pulse spike. It was Ethan's father. His silence wasn't passive. It was watchful, calculating. He hadn't said a word, but he was looking around, taking note. She knew that look. A man waiting for an excuse. The hallway felt too narrow, the air too thin. We're handling some paperwork, Mrs. Campbell continued, trying to buy time. If you just wait in the front office... That was when Ethan's voice broke through from inside the room. Don't let them take me. 3 seconds of stillness. Then chaos. Jessica pushed forward, yanking at the door handle. Ethan, get over here right now. Mrs. Campbell moved fast, stepping between her and the door. Jessica shoved her, and suddenly Principal Henderson was there, grabbing Jessica's arm, his voice stern. That's enough. Let go of me, she shrieked. And then Ethan's father spoke for the first time. We'll file a complaint. You'll lose your job for this. Mrs. Campbell stared at him, really looked. And for the first time, she understood the depth of Ethan's fear. The cold authority in his eyes, the way he didn't raise his voice because he didn't need to. His power was quiet, heavy, the kind that didn't scream, only pressed down until you stopped breathing. Behind her, Ethan whimpered. The door creaked open, a crack, and Miss Ramirez emerged, one arm wrapped protectively around Ethan's small frame. His face was ghost white, his lips trembling. That's when the front doors flew open again. The CPS agent entered, breathless but composed, her badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights. A uniformed officer followed close behind. Mr. Parker, Jessica Reed, I need you to come with me. Jessica exploded. This is ridiculous. He's just a kid. He's making it up. But the officer stepped between her and Ethan. Ma'am, please calm down. The agent knelt before Ethan. Hi, Ethan. My name's Natalie. I'm here to make sure you're okay. Ethan didn't answer. He didn't even look up. He just moved closer to Mrs. Campbell and whispered, Please, don't let them touch me. Natalie stood slowly. Ethan's coming with me. Tonight he'll be staying in a safe home with a very kind foster mother and a dog named Max. Jessica's fury turned to disbelief. You're actually doing this? The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. The officer guided Ethan's father and Jessica out of the hallway, leaving behind a vacuum of tension. Ethan clung to Mrs. Campbell. Her heart cracked open in a new way. She had spent her life teaching children how to spell, how to count, how to find their voice. But nothing had prepared her for this. She walked with him to the parking lot, her hand wrapped around his tiny fingers. When Natalie opened the car door, Ethan turned. Can you come with me? Her throat closed. I can't, sweetheart, but I'll be thinking about you every single day. He nodded solemnly and got in. As the car pulled away, Mrs. Campbell stood under the fading afternoon sun, her arms hanging at her sides, and for the first time in a very long time, she didn't feel like a teacher. She felt like a soldier who had just stepped off the battlefield. But the war wasn't over. Not really. That night, alone in her apartment, Mrs. Ventoncourt, Campbell stared at the spelling test still folded in her purse. Help me, it said, and underneath that was something she hadn't noticed before. Faint, written in lighter pencil, barely visible unless the light hit just right. He hurts Jenny too. What would you do if saving one child meant exposing a darker truth no one else wants to see? The next morning, Mrs. Campbell returns to school with a new question in her heart and a decision that could unravel everything. Mrs. Campbell stood in the parking lot long after the car disappeared, the soft hum of late afternoon blending with the rustle of tree branches overhead. Autumn was coming early this year. The breeze already held that particular chill that hinted at endings. Her fingers still tingled where Ethan's small hand had held hers. She replayed it all, the desperation in his eyes, the trembling whisper, the paper with its 2 words, and now the final message hidden beneath, he hurts Jenny too. That second line shifted something. It twisted her gut in a different way, because it wasn't just about Ethan anymore. There was another child, another voice being silenced, another closet, perhaps, with no window, no air, and no teddy bear to cling to. The next morning, she arrived at school early, even before the janitor unlocked the front door. Her classroom was still and dim, morning light just beginning to filter through the blinds. She pulled Ethan's paper from her purse and laid it flat on her desk, smoothing the creases. The graphite shimmered under the light, faint but undeniable. Jenny. She didn't know who Jenny was. Jessica's daughter? Another child from a previous marriage? A neighbor? A cousin? She only knew one thing. The moment Ethan no longer feared for himself, his first thought was someone else. And that meant someone else might still be trapped in the dark. Miss Ramirez found her in the main office, hands curled around a cup of coffee gone cold. Mrs. Campbell didn't hesitate. She showed her the note. The counselor read it once, then again, then sat down slowly. You think he meant Jessica's daughter? If she has one, Mrs. Campbell said. We have to find out. It took 3 phone calls to reach Natalie, the CPS agent from the day before. She sounded tired, her voice hoarse, but when Mrs. Campbell explained the second note, she went silent. Then, that's new information. I'll look into it immediately. If Ethan said that, we have to take it seriously. The rest of the school day passed in a fog. Mrs. Campbell taught math and phonics and read Where the Wild Things Are to the class, but part of her stayed locked in a quiet room with a boy and a teddy bear. At lunch, she found herself staring out the window, wondering what Ethan was doing. If he was eating with Max, curled up at his feet? If he was talking yet? If he was sleeping better now that the closet door was no longer a threat? That evening, she got the call. Natalie's voice was steadier this time. We found Jenny, she said. She's Jessica's daughter from a previous relationship. 8 years old, enrolled in a school 2 towns over, We did an emergency welfare check at their house this afternoon. Mrs. Campbell held her breath. There was a locked utility closet in the basement. No light, no window. The walls were scratched. Jenny had been inside it recently. She confirmed it, and more. Silence pressed between them. She said Ethan used to sneak crackers from the pantry to give her after Jessica punished her. Said he'd whisper jokes through the door to help her stop crying. Mrs. Campbell covered her mouth. He tried to protect her, Natalie added gently, even when he was terrified. Later that night, when Mrs. Campbell sat alone in her small kitchen with a candle flickering on the table, she thought about all the things people never see. The bruises hidden under sleeves, the silent flinches at loud noises, the children who sit perfectly still so they won't be noticed. She realized that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it speaks in shaky pencil on lined paper. Sometimes it's 2 words and a tear. And sometimes it's a little boy risking everything to save someone else. A few weeks passed. CPS kept her updated. Jenny was placed with a relative out of state. Jessica had been arrested. Ethan's father was under investigation. The wheels of justice moved slowly, but they were moving. And then, one crisp Thursday morning, Mrs. Campbell found an envelope in her mailbox at school. No stamp, just her name in familiar, shaky handwriting. Inside was a single crayon drawing. A house with a yellow door, a big fluffy dog, and 2 stick figures standing side by side. One taller, with curly hair, and one small, holding a teddy bear. At the bottom, in bold red letters, it said, "Thank you for seeing me." Mrs. Campbell smiled, but her eyes stung. That afternoon, during quiet reading time, she stood by the window again. Leaves swirled on the playground outside. Life moved on. Kids laughed. Bells rang. But somewhere out there, 2 children were free. Not because someone shouted, not because of a grand heroic act, but because someone listened and refused to look away. And in a world that often turns its back, that may be the bravest thing anyone can do. What part of this story moved you the most, and why? Comment 100 if this story touched your heart. Let us know where you're watching from. Share this video with someone who needs to believe in quiet heroes. Thank you for watching Life Stories.